Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me and having me here today with Jeff. It's my honor to be between you as friends, as a family, as part of our global moral movement for equality, for justice, and for freedom in Palestine. I want to start my speech by sending my greetings to all of you and sending the greetings of my people to all of you. Palestinians in the ground, they watch what you do here in Norway and in Europe and in the US, and they feel stronger with your activities, with your actions, with your sympathy, with your political work for Palestine. People in the street, they stop me when I'm walking and tell me, Issa, we are not alone anymore. So we don't feel alone, in spite of the hard life, in spite of the atrocity, in spite of the genocide, the apartheid, the aggression, the ethnic cleansing. We, the Palestinians, are together with you winning the narrative. We are winning the world. Israel is accused of genocide. It's labeled as a genocide country. It's labeled as apartheid country. For the first time, the Israeli Prime Minister is wanted to the International Criminal Court. That's because of you, because of the public opinion you are creating all over the world. Because of you, as people here, we have a lot of resources to stay and remain on the ground. Because of you, we are not cheap targets for the Israeli military and the Israeli settlers and soldiers. Some people say, we are working hard and nothing is changing. No, there is a lot changing. Not only changing, we are in defense. We are defending the land and we are defending the narrative. So we are lucky that we all together in the right side of history. My nomination and Jeff's nomination for Nobel Peace Prize means to me that we all can win, not a prize, we can win more people to join our just struggle to make a change. I am Issa, I am from Hebron city, Al-Khalil. It's around 30 kilometers to the south of Jerusalem. Hebron was described as a ghost town, and it's a microcosm of the Israeli occupation. And if you really want to understand the Israeli occupation, the Israeli apartheid, you come to Hebron to walk in the streets of Hebron for a few hours. And all of that started 1994. It started 67, but it was small settlements in 1979, one settlement outside, it's called Kiryat Arba, but it's all started after the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre, 1994. Who did the massacre? Was Baruch Goldstein. Baruch Goldstein was criticized, his party was declared as a terrorist group, and his followers were not the majority in Israel. That's 1994. But after the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre and the Israeli military going after the Palestinians who were injured in the mosque to the hospitals to kill them. So we had 29 Palestinians were killed in the mosque, 6 Palestinians were killed by the Israeli military outside the mosque, and many of them outside the hospitals. The result of that massacre was to close the streets for Palestinians. I didn't go to my school for 3 months. They divide the markets, close the shops, close the houses, and they started the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from the city center of Hebron. That was 1994. Then we had the agreement, and we all Palestinians, the majority of Palestinians, were optimistic about the two-state solution. Because we wanted to end this, suffering of the people, and we went there with good hope. We thought that it's the beginning of freedom. We didn't know that we were trapped. And we didn't know that it was not about peace. It was about pieces, as it is now. So 1997, we had Hebron redeployment agreement. They divided the city for two parts. One for the Palestinians under the Palestinian Authority control, H1, H2 under the Israeli military control. It's temporary for 2 years. Then we will have a Palestinian state. If you read the agreements, you will find out from the beginning there were no two states, no peace. In the contrary, controlling the water, controlling the electricity, controlling the import, controlling the export. So the Palestinians didn't stay silent about it, especially, all the provocation from the Israeli ministers and the Israeli officials who were trying to change the status quo in Al-Aqsa and in Jerusalem. So the second intifada started. The Israelis used the opportunity of the second intifada to close 1,800 shops in Hebron, which is the city center of Hebron, close it completely. 1,000 apartments became empty, which is around 43% of the housing units. They closed the main streets, 22 checkpoints, 100 movement barriers, and they made the life of the Palestinians almost impossible. And they started with the policy of that they don't evict you from your house, but they make it impossible for you to stay and remain in your house. How they make it impossible for you to stay and remain in your house? By you don't feel safe because of the settler violence. You have no protection. Who protects you from the violent Israeli settlers? Nobody. And from the Israeli military aggression, nobody protects you, and they have impunity. No social life. You are completely disconnected from your neighbors, from your friends, from your family, and no services. Imagine that to bring in an ambulance, it's a big mission. So you skip all the emergency cases. That's in Hebron, and that's before October 7th. That was the situation before October 7th in Hebron city, in my city. In the same time, you are not allowed to practice your national identity. A Palestinian flag can't be raised on your house. Any Palestinian sign in your shirt, they force you to take it off, and sometimes they do it for the children and for the Palestinians. All of that was happening in the West Bank, especially in Hebron, and nobody talks about that. Unfortunately, the Israeli is misusing technology. Everybody on earth is using artificial intelligence to save lives of human beings, to make it easier for human beings, to increase production. But in Israel, no. They use surveillance and artificial intelligence to add another layer of oppression and intimidation for the Palestinian people. And they are using us in Hebron especially as a lab. You know what is a lab? Simulation object. We are a simulation. They test this technology in Hebron, then they sell it to Kashmir, they sell it to China, they sell it to other countries. Tested in Hebron, on us. And you are profiled, you are monitored, your privacy is violated because of the surveillance systems in Hebron. And we thought it's only Hebron and that will stay in Hebron. After October 7th, the Israeli government, who are the followers of Baruch Goldstein, who did the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre, so we say that Baruch Goldstein won, his violence won. Nobody is talking that Baruch Goldstein, that terrorist who killed Palestinians in the mosque, his followers and his supporters are in the Israeli government now, especially Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Israeli National Security Minister. He's in the US now, welcomed by the American government, by the State Department and many officials in the United States, and he's free. And nobody's describing that Itamar Ben-Gvir is a terrorist. And his party, Kach movement, was announced almost all over the world as a terrorist organization. Till 2022, the Kahanist party, which is his party, was outlawed in the United States. But now they are mainstream. And for October 7th, half of the Israelis were describing the current Israeli government as a fascist government by the Israelis. For us, they are occupation, they are oppression, they are very bad. But after October 7th, Israel exposed its true face and its true intention. I was tortured on October 7th, kidnapped, tortured, beaten, sexually assaulted by the Israeli soldiers for 12 hours. And they know my politics, that I'm peaceful and non-violence activist. 12 hours of pain. And the soldiers were rejoicing, torturing me. In the beginning, I was shy to talk about what happened to me. As a human rights defender, you know, there is a war in Gaza, they are bombing people, civilians are killed from both sides. So what to say? Being tortured, being sexually assaulted. But I found that it's a phenomena. It's a decision from the Israeli military and the Israeli settlers to torture Palestinians. They started torturing Palestinians, detaining Palestinians and beating them up, breaking their bones, sexually harassing women and men as a phenomena in Palestine, in Gaza and in the West Bank. And we in Hebron, we are very sad. We are so disappointed. We are broken. We hear the jets. We hear the bombs in Gaza. Each time I hear an airplane, you know, in Hebron, I know, oh my God, children will be killed. Women will be killed. We hear it. And we are not allowed to say anything about it or to do anything about it. And we are completely in siege. We are restricted. We are not able to do anything for that. And after October 7th, the Israeli government, led by the fascist leaders who are welcome in Europe, and many countries, they are shy to say we will arrest a war criminal as Netanyahu. They were welcoming the arrest of Putin. Putin is okay to be wanted by the ICC, but Netanyahu is not. Openly double standards. So thanks to the Palestinians who exposed many Western countries who are acting according to their interest, not according to the principles of the people here and the people in Europe. So after October 7th, 900 checkpoints in West Bank. So Hebron model was transferred all over West Bank. We travel between checkpoints, not between cities. We all live in small towns with a gate. They open the gate whenever they want. They close the gate whenever they want. And most of the time, the gates are closed. Beating Palestinians, arresting Palestinians. 3,500 Palestinians are in administrative detention now. Nobody's talking about them. We all say that Israeli civilian hostages should go back to their homes. What about the Palestinian prisoners who don't see their families, who eat only 1,000 calories now? I have a friend who was part of my group, was in jail in administrative detention I didn't know why. I'm his friend. I didn't know why he was in jail. When he was released, he lost 40 kilos from his body, from his meat. 40 kilos, not only him. The majority of the Palestinian prisoners are ill-treated, tortured, beaten. Every day they beat them up. Every day they make their life horrible and terrible. And nobody's talking about them. The Israeli soldiers raid the cities, raid the communities, and they destroy the furniture, leave the house, and they draw Stars of David after they leave. The Israeli military changed to act as a militia, not as an army, without any accountability, without any, even condemnation from here. CDT Man jail, CDT Man, in Israel, is worse than Guantanamo, 10 times worse. A rape was made in front of cameras, CCTV cameras. The rapist was in the Israeli TV talking about how he did it. Israeli TV. So that's the situation in the ground now in the West Bank. So they are busy with Gaza, but in the same time, they are creating facts in the ground to isolate the cities. There is no geographical continuity in the West Bank now. It's really, not easy to reach from one city to another. House demolition, more than 1,000 Palestinian houses were demolished in last year. Building more and more settlements, building roads for settlements, and making the life of the Palestinians harder and harder. So they want to win the time. They are speeding up to create facts in the ground. In spite of all of that, in spite of the hard time we face, I see my people getting stronger. People are staying, people are remaining, people are, some people were hoping to come and, live here in Norway or in Europe because of, that Israeli leaders saying that we will transfer Palestinians, we force Palestinians to leave. They stopped. They don't say, oh, we don't leave, we stay. Why? Because it's about the land. They want to take more land. They want to take more, they want to win the narrative. But because of you, we are winning the narrative here all over the world. We are winning, we are not losing. And in the land, we are really making it hard for them to win more land. We do a lot of civil disobedience and non-violence resistance to document the human rights violations and expose their human rights violations. There is a new case in the ICC about settler violence and about settlements. And many settlers will be wanted soon, I hope, by the International Criminal Court. We became closer to each other as Palestinians. We act as a community. We do a lot of women activities, children activities. We do counter their surveillance by having our own surveillance. We counter their isolation by having a social life together as people who are living inside the closed areas in the West Bank. And we say it loud. You stay active here, we stay active in Palestine. This is what we want. We want you to stay active here and stay united. This is something very important. We have many different opinions about how to end the conflict, or how to fight, or how to make the occupation costly. I say that we all should be unified in a movement, a global movement, in Palestine and outside Palestine, to make the occupation costly and make the occupiers accountable, and make apartheid and the supporter of apartheid here and even in Israel accountable according to the international standards and using non-violence resistance. The last thing I want to mention that many people describe me as Gandhi. Issa as Gandhi, New York Times even wrote about it. As if I am the only non-violence activist in Palestine, or as if I am the creative of the non-violence movement. No, I'm not. I am one of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who are remaining in their land. Each worker who wakes up at 3 a.m. to go to his work and pass a checkpoint is Gandhi. Each woman who decides, because to stay and remain, it's the decision of the women in Palestine, because she decides in the house. Each woman is deciding to stay and remain in spite of the Israeli intimidation, aggression, violence, harassment to her and her daughters is Gandhi. Each Palestinian farmer in South Mount Hebron, in Jordan Valley, in East Jerusalem, who are farming the land, facing the violent, wild, terrorist settlers, are Gandhis, are amazing activists. Each doctor, each engineer, each Palestinian remaining in spite of all this hard life, they are all resisting, and we say active existence is resistance. We will remain, we will stay, but by your support, by your help, by your backup, you are the ones who are very important pillar in our global movement toward justice, freedom, and equality for everybody from the river to the sea. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You bring tears to our eyes. It's amazing what you are telling, and we could sit here to listen to you till the morning. Unfortunately, we have this place booked for a few just a few hours. Jeff, Issa stole a few more minutes from your time, but that's what you call it, payback.
Yes, let me steal something from him.
So I like the humor you have in between you. It's really, really nice and touching. Please, Jeff.
Well, thank you much. Sarah, you'll stand up again when it's necessary. Issa and I have one thing in common. We can both outspeak Castro. Castro can go for 5 hours. We could easily go for 6, 7, 8 hours, each of us. So that's your job, is to stop us.
No, I will help. I will help.
And you'll help. It's very good to be here. This is my third time, I think, in Stavanger. I've worked a lot with Engelbreth and the Palestine committee here. And I know that you were all the initiators behind the nomination of Issa and I for the Nobel Peace Prize. So we thank you for that. It's really an honor. And Ingrid, of course, who was the parliamentary channel for that as well. And it's very important. It's a very important, as Issa said, platform for getting our views out. It gives a lot of legitimacy, to the work that we're doing at a time when obviously Palestinians and those who support the Palestinian struggle are being delegitimized by governments and the media and so on. So this kind of support, I think, is really, and the fact that, it puts us also in the company of other freedom fighters in Russia, in the Ukraine, in Africa, all over the world, in the Arab world as well, I think strengthens, because we have to remember that Palestine is only a part of a global struggle for justice. I'm in a very different situation from Issa, of course. As you can hear, I wasn't even born in Palestine. I was born actually in the Norwegian part of the United States, which is Minnesota, right? So when I come here, it's the same trees, it's the same houses, it's almost the same food. You eat reindeer, we eat venison in Minnesota. And I'm not going to go into the whole reason why I went to Israel in 1973. It wasn't for Zionist reasons. It was for political reasons. The occupation was new at that time. There was still an opening and some hope that maybe something could work out. And I was a part of that whole the peace movement in Israel at that time. But we didn't have a concept in those days of settler colonialism. We use the term settler colonialism often. I mean, Issa mentioned it. It's one of those terms, interestingly, that escaped the academic world. Most of these terms are very academic, and they stay within the realm of the academics. Settler colonialism, even though it's kind of hard to say, has become a part of the public discourse. And it's very important, but most people aren't academics. And it's very important for us to unpack, to explain what settler colonialism means because unless we're able to help people understand the logic, and this is what Issa was talking about, the logic of Zionism, the logic of Israel, why there's an occupation, why they're torturing Palestinians, why the genocide in Gaza. Unless we can give people a conceptual framework, it's very hard for us to bring them into the logic of it. I'm a settler, basically. I mean, I wasn't aware of that when I went to Israel. I saw myself as kind of an immigrant. But in fact, I'm a settler who joined a settler colonial movement. So I know of what I speak. In my books and in my writings, I call myself a settler who refuses. In other words, first of all, it's very important that I acknowledge that I'm a settler. And I think that's one reason I hope that Issa is able to even appear with me. I think that's one thing that begins to bridge the gap, that I acknowledge that I'm a settler, basically in Issa's country. But beyond that, a settler who refuses also works to end the settler colonial enterprise. In other words, I would hope that there's a point in which I can become an ex-settler, that actually Issa and I can be neighbors and comrades in a common country together without the violence and the inequality and the structural inequality that comes with settler colonialism. Settler colonialism, look, we get trapped in the Israeli narrative, all of us, including Palestinians, because we don't use the right terminology. Now, I'm a professor of anthropology, so you'll excuse a few-minute lecture in anthropology. We use the concept conflict. We always talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Israeli-Arab conflict. Even Palestinians use that term. But it's not a conflict. Settler colonialism is a unilateral invasion of someone else's country with the intent of taking it over. There's no sides. The problem with conflict, and this was, of course, the fatal flaw of the Oslo process. I'm very sorry that that Oslo became involved with that whole thing. Is that, it creates, what's a conflict? It's between two sides, right? So all of a sudden, an immoral, illegal, unjust settler colonial movement that comes to take over someone else's country and expel them and take their land is all of a sudden legitimized and raised to the status of a side in a conflict. So the minute we say conflict, we're elevating Zionism to the status of a legitimate side in a conflict. And what do we do to the Palestinians? This is an indigenous population, was never in a conflict with Jews. I mean, Jews had lived in Palestine for millennia. There's never been an issue like that. They weren't involved in any conflict. They were a peaceful people living in their country on their own lands when they're invaded. And when any people is invaded, they resist, right? Well, that creates this idea of a conflict. So what happens to the Palestinians? Instead of a people entitled to say, no, this land is ours, this country is ours, we have a right to self-determination, instead, they become a side in a conflict. In other words, as Zionism is elevated, with its legitimacy as a side, the Palestinians are degraded from being a people with inalienable rights to their country to all of a sudden a side. Now, what happens in a conflict? How to resolve a conflict? You compromise, right? You negotiate. Well, what are we exactly expecting the Palestinians to negotiate? How much of their country now belongs to the settler colonists? Are they expected to be in a marketplace and bargain and barter how many refugees can come back? I mean, what exactly? You see, we trap the Palestinians in this little box called a side. And of course, the sides aren't equal. It appears to be equal when you say a conflict. We always hear the language, both sides should end the violence, both sides. But there isn't a both sides, because one side, which is Israel, is a state, a member of the United Nations, with diplomatic relations with Norway, sort of. States have a right to an army. Kamala Harris would tell you Israel has a right to defend itself against the people of Gaza, right? And states can't be terrorists. Terrorists are only non-state actors, right? So it's very easy for a state not only to destroy a non-state people like the Palestinians, but to delegitimize them, to criminalize them, because as non-state actors, Palestinians have no right to an army. They don't have the diplomatic relations. They're not in the United Nations. They don't have the leverage that a state has. So instead, we should stop using the concept conflict, erase it from our vocabulary in terms of Palestine, and talk about settler colonialism. And settler colonialism then is a unilateral movement on the part of a foreign population to take over someone else's country. It's happened. Zionism isn't unique. The United States, Canada, South Africa, Algeria, Australia, New Zealand, the Chinese in Tibet, the Russians in Eastern Europe. I mean, there's a lot of examples of settler colonialism. The closest to Zionism and what the Palestinians are experiencing, I think, is South Africa. And that's where we take a lot of our lessons from. So the idea of settler colonialism is to take over someone else's country. So how do you resolve settler colonialism? You don't negotiate. Well, if we've learned anything, and certainly what Issa is describing to us, is there are no negotiations between the colonized and the colonizer. The colonizer has the power, and the colonizer has the agenda of taking over the entire country. There was never, ever, ever an intent on the part of Israel for a two-state solution. That a Palestinian state somehow, as the Oslo process kind of envisioned, a Palestinian state emerging alongside Israel. That misunderstands the whole logic of settler colonialism. It was to take over the entire country from the river to the sea, not 78% of it or 56% of it, the whole thing. So that's why I'm saying once you get into the logic of settler colonialism, it becomes clear what is illusionary, like the two-state solution, and what in fact has to be done in order to end it. The only way you end a settler colonial project is through decolonization. We have to end the state of Israel as a Jewish state, and we have to in decolonization, we have to dismantle all the structures of domination and control that the Zionists have over the Palestinians. So it's a matter of the entire country. We also don't make a distinction between the occupation and Israel proper. That's also a part of the conflict model. Somehow, 78% of Palestine, that's recognized as Israel by Norway and the international community, is outside of negotiations. It's not a part of the problem. It's a fact of life. It's a normal state, right? And so when we're compromising and negotiating, that's only on the 22% that remains. The West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem. That becomes, the 22% becomes 100%, you see? In a settler colonial approach, no, the entire country has been settled. I mean, there was a process of a half a century between when the Zionists began to invade Palestine at the end of the 19th century and 1948. There's a whole history of colonization, expulsion, displacement that happened before there was a state of Israel. So we can't start in 1948, and now we have Israel, and now we have to deal with the Palestinians. We have to deal with the whole thing. And I'm the head of an organization called ICAD, the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. And we work on the house demolition issue, so we're a part of the resistance, together with Issa on that level. I don't have time to get into that at all. But I'm also a member of another organization, a Palestinian-led organization called the One Democratic State Campaign. And we believe that you can't be in a political struggle without an end game. You can't say we're going to resist, we're going to cause the collapse of the occupation and everything, and then we're going to somehow make that happen, and then we're going to figure out where we go next. You can't do that. You have to have a program if you're going to be in the political process. If I go into the Norwegian parliament and they say to me, all right, what do you guys want? And I don't have an answer, that's not exactly a strong position to be in. And not only that, but a political program is a part of the process. You're beginning to prepare people for what's happening. When Nelson Mandela in South Africa told the whites, we are all South Africans, and they had a constitution before the end of apartheid, that's what allowed the transition to take place. If South Africa, if the ANC had caused the collapse of the apartheid regime, without at all dealing with what's going to happen later, what's going to happen to the white population in South Africa, there would have been a worse civil war, because the whites would have felt threatened and imperiled. And the transition, South Africa is not perfect, but there was a peaceful transition from apartheid to democracy. If we want to do a transition in Palestine from an apartheid Israeli regime and an occupation to a democracy of equal rights for everyone, in which, of course, the refugees return to their country, we have to have a vision and a program, and we have to show, I think the Palestinians have to show the Palestinians, so there has to be a lot of intra-Palestinian discussion on this. Palestinians have to show Israelis that are going to remain. And there'll be 40% of the population. And they have to show the international community, if they want support from governments and so on, that there is a place for everyone in Palestine in a decolonized, post-colonial state. And so that's really where we're coming from. We work with Issa on resistance, but we also believe that resistance at some point has to also move into a political program. And that political program has to be up front. So with Sarah's help, I'll end with that.